Hey guys, welcome back to Southern Gal True Crime. I share missing persons, cold cases, true crime news, and more. And for today, or for this week's case spotlight, I have a solved case that I wanted to share with you. A cold case that has been solved after 40 years. And you guys know I love cold cases, and this case particularly caught my attention because the victim, Terri McAdams, was originally from Arkansas, although she was killed in Texas. So I will give you the information that was announced on August 15th of this year, 2024. The Arlington Police Department and the FBI Dallas Field Office announced a breakthrough in the brutal 1985 Valentine's Day homicide of 22-year-old Terri McAdams. Up until now, the case had gone cold for decades with no suspects or leads. Officials revealed that new technology has helped or did help identify the offender. Just a little background on the crime. Arlington homicide detective Devin Coffer said a maintenance worker found Terri McAdams, who had been essayed and brutally beaten, in her fiance's apartment at Walnut Ridge Apartments, which is in Texas. Coffer said that Terry's offender entered the apartment through a bedroom sliding door and that she passed away from blunt force trauma. Terry's younger sister said at the press conference that was held, she said Terry was an amazing girl, beautiful and full of life. She was a friend to everyone. As I stand here today, I know she is smiling down on this miraculous moment. So how did they solve this case? 40 years after the brutal homicide of UTA student Terri McAdams, investigators credit advanced technology and investigative genetic genealogy, which combines crime scene DNA with genealogical research, for the breakthrough that identified the offender. Arlington Police Chief Al Jones said in a press conference, "We finally got to provide answers that the department wanted to provide for nearly 40 years. Investigators say they finally connected DNA to a suspect named Bernard Sharp, who police say committed a double homicide and then took his own life about 9 months after he took the life of Terry. Police say McAdams, Terry, was brutally beaten, essayed, and her life was taken in her fiance's Arlington apartment on Valentine's Day in 1985. She was just 22 years old, and she was the oldest of three sisters. Her sister, Karen Hooper, says she was feisty and fun, and she truly loved life. To know her was to love her. As I stand here today, I know that she and my mom and dad are smiling down on this miraculous moment." Years of investigating led to dead ends in the case until Arlington detectives and the FBI reopened it in 2021 using a new technique called investigative genetic genealogy. IGG, as we call it, combines unidentified crime scene DNA with meticulous genealogy research and the use of historical public records to identify new leads, said Chad Yarbrough, who is a special agent with the FBI Dallas office. Investigators say genealogists were able to track down a distant relative whose DNA proved that Bernard Sharp was the offender. She had gone into her fiance's apartment, said Karen Anderson, the host of the Reporter's Notebook podcast. She says he was out of town at the time, and she had made him a Valentine's Day cake, a heart-shaped cake, chatted a little bit that night on the phone with her sister. After she hung up, an intruder broke into the apartment, brutally attacked her, and it was devastating. Anderson, a former Dallas Morning News reporter, has dedicated years to covering cold cases in North Texas especially Terri McAdams' homicide. She says she has spoken to the family a lot over the years about her tragic death. Families that are waiting for answers are completely dependent on technology, said Anderson, who also thinks genetic testing is a game changer. We're just hoping that as things progress technology wise, it will become less expensive to do this type of advanced testing and get answers to families. But as police departments are able to come up with the resources to pay for this testing, there's more hope than ever to get these cases solved. Meanwhile, Arlington police say no charges will be filed because Sharp is deceased. Even so, Hooper and the rest of the McAdams family are grateful to at least have closure. Hooper said, "We hope that our story is going to provide that same level of hope to other families. We kind of thought this day might never come, but thanks to these detectives and thanks to genealogy, it worked." Police and the FBI say they are hopeful this new technology can lead to solving more cold cases in the future. However, investigators also say they need the public's help and they are urging more people to submit their DNA to commercial databases. So that is how, and you guys, anybody who's watched me for any length of time know that I'm big on this and using genetic genealogy to solve these cold cases. So now we're going to take a look at who Bernard Sharp was. So Bernard Sharp was definitely not a good fella. He did have a history of violence, and he did, after he took Terry's life, he did go on to commit other crimes. So nearly 40 years after the brutal homicide of a 22-year-old UT Arlington student, authorities have identified her suspected offender, who's been deceased nearly as long as the victim. On Wednesday, Arlington police and the FBI announced that Bernard Sharp took the life of Terri McAdams. DNA testing done on an out-of-state relative confirmed Sharp's identity. On Valentine's Day 1985, a maintenance worker found Terry's body inside the apartment that she shared with her fiance. As I said earlier, she had been SA'd and passed away of a blunt force trauma by a blunt instrument. So 9 months after he took Terry's life, on November 3rd, 1985, in a double homicide, the then 30-year-old Sharp fatally GSW'd his estranged wife and her best friend and critically wounded his wife's cousin. He then turned the gun on himself, according to police. Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office records identified the victims of the crime as 29-year-old Denise Sharp and 25-year-old Deborah De La Torre. Denise Sharp's wounded cousin ran to a neighbor's house for help. She just said Bernard had gone berserk and shot everybody, a neighbor told the Star Telegram in 1985. The police said Sharp had forced his way into the home and waited to ambush the women, according to the newspaper archives. And no arrests were ever made in connection with Terry's homicide, in spite of a thorough investigation at the time, according to police. In 2021, investigators were able to build a DNA profile for a male suspect using physical evidence collected at the scene of the crime. No matches were found in a national database of convicted offenders. So detectives decided to try another technique involving DNA and genealogy research. After several months, investigators identified Sharp as a potential suspect. A DNA sample recently provided by one of his relatives clinched the ID, according to police. Arlington Police Detective Devin Colfer said, "Getting that call to me, it meant everything in the world." Sharp and Terri McAdams apparently did not know each other. Police believe that Bernard Sharp took the life of Terri at random after gaining access to her apartment through a sliding glass door. At the time, Sharp lived nearby, and he had at least one unrelated arrest and a criminal history of SA involving two victims other than Terri McAdams. Police said that investigators at the time questioned him in Terri's case because of his history and proximity, but at that time there was not enough evidence to link him to the killing. Authorities said they will continue to investigate whether he may have been responsible for any other unsolved crimes. And in some articles that I've read, they are considering the fact that he may be a serial offender, just due to his history of violence and the crimes he committed after Terri's crime. Over the years, it would be easy to lose faith and accept that this case might never be solved, said Chief of Police Al Jones at the news conference. But Terri's family never gave up hope, and our detectives never wavered. Now we get to provide answers that this department has wanted to provide for nearly 4 decades. So that is a little bit about the offender, Mr. Sharp there. And so now we're going to take a look at the most important part of this case, the victim, Terri McAdams. So Terri was enrolled at UT Arlington because her fiance had gotten a job in Arlington. She had started out at the University of Arkansas, where she met her fiance, and then she ended up moving to Arlington with him. She wanted to finish her education, so she started going to UTA. Growing up, Terri was always popular. As a teenager, she drove a convertible with an 8-track player. That made her the most popular person to drive when she went out with friends and her sisters. Hopper said they would ride around in her car for hours, listening to music and belting out the lyrics together. Terri was part of the Phi Mu sorority at the University of Arkansas, and she was a cheerleader, always popular and never without a friend. She liked to dance and took classes for it for years. But when she reached Arlington, she was more focused on planning her December 1985 wedding and finishing her degree. She changed her major a few times, always finding something else that interested her, and her family can't remember exactly what she wanted to do after college. Hopper recalls stories from when Terri went to Europe with her best friend. Terri told everyone stories about her travels, but one that pops back to Hopper's head regularly is how she met Princess Diana while going out dancing at one point. She said it was a brief encounter. Terri and her friend saw the princes, and Terri asked if she would dance with them. Diana said she couldn't just then, but they got an opportunity to talk with her. To her younger sisters, Hopper and Pamela McInnes, Terri was the big sister who was always there for them. She'd keep them entertained and taught them how to drive. Hopper described her sister as, quote, feisty and fun, and said she truly loved life. To know her was to love her, she said. Okay, so there was some interesting information also in this article about right before Terri was killed, or her life was taken. It says that Terri desperately tried to protect herself after a series of homicides and disappearances of young women in North Texas that made headlines beginning in 1984. The 22-year-old student took extraordinary precautions, such as quitting her job in Irving so she would not have to drive home to her apartment at night. Her late mother, Ann McAdams, told the Star-Telegram in 1985. After dark, especially when her fiance was out of town, Terri became reclusive, according to her mother. She rarely left home, even to buy groceries. She called her mom in Little to discuss her fears, sometimes more than once a day. Fort Worth police and other law enforcement in North Texas did start a task force to investigate the possibility of one or more serial offenders committing the homicides. Ann McAdams said in March of 1985 she was terrified. All the girls who disappeared or their lives were taken were about her age. They were young, pretty girls. So naturally, being that far from home in a strange town and something like that going on, you would be afraid. She was really careful about not going out at night, and she took every precaution she thought necessary. So, as we said earlier, the man who took Terri's life broke into her home in February of 1995. They did not know each. Bernard Sharp did not know Terri, and apparently it was just a random crime. Mr. Sharp did pass away 9 months later, as we talked about earlier. Terri's younger sister, Karen Hopper, spoke at the news conference when the Arlington Police Department, when officials announced the case was solved. Over the years, her sister has thought about what it would be like to know who took the life of her sister. She told the Star Telegram after the news conference. She always thought it would be better to find out that her offender was alive and could be arrested and to watch justice be served. Now, though, she said there may be a blessing in not having to go to a trial after all these years. Knowing who took the life of Terri gives the family answers they need for peace. Closure isn't the word she'd use to describe it. There will always be a wound from losing her big sister, but she does finally feel at peace. She says Terri was an amazing girl, beautiful and full of life. She was the best big sister to me and Pamela. So that was at least the family's got closure in this case, although the offender did end up taking his own life. And I will keep an eye on this because it will be interesting to know if Bernard Sharp, if they find out that he does have other victims, and possibly if he could have taken the lives of the other girls that went missing and their lives were taken in that area starting in 1984. I'm sure they'll probably test his DNA if they have any DNA from any of those things. So it will definitely be interesting if they come up with anything. Please let me know in comments what you guys think about that. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the thumbs up before you leave. Leave a comment to let me know what you think about this case. Share it anywhere and everywhere you can. If you have not already subscribed, please consider subscribing. Once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.